my tribute to Kent. I'd like to share a story. You all heard this at the funeral because it is one of the best stories that can be told. But I do have a visual aid, which I'm going to now have Dusty film, so you don't have to see me anymore. Okay, so the story is about these Christmas socks. Once upon a time, a long time ago, Amy and Mom made these socks. I don't even remember what year it was. I think T was maybe 4 or 5, something like that. I actually already have given T his Christmas sock this season, but anyway, we had made these. We had spent probably almost a year on them. And in our hurry to get to Richfield for Christmas and our hustle and bustle of the season, we forgot them. By the time we got to Richfield, it was probably the next day before I realized that we had forgotten to bring them. And I was pretty sad, but I didn't want to make a big deal of it because, you know, pouting is not nice at Christmas time, especially. So we went to bed, and the next morning we woke up. I think it was the Christmas Eve. Would that sound right, Dusty? He said yes. It was Christmas Eve morning, and we woke up, and not too early, but I realized that Dusty was gone. And I thought, wow, he got up early, and we went upstairs, and Dusty, help me with the rest of the details. I don't remember what time you guys left.
Oh, we just left really early, and Kent and I got up and drove to Cedar.
Yeah, Dusty and Kent got up early and drove to Cedar City while the rest of us slumbered in our beds, all snuggled like sugar plums. And they got back, I think you guys got back just not long after we woke up. I think you left early enough to just drive back there. And Kent, of course, took his car and his gas money and drove to Cedar City from Richfield and got the Christmas socks, and they had them there not long after we woke up. And that was seriously the best Christmas surprise ever. So to have those socks there. And so what we've learned from Kent over the years, and I think everyone can relate to this, is just that Kent has always been one to do random acts of kindness and selfless service. He's done so many for us. Another one was that he taught Jessica how to drive. Right after she got her learner's permit, we went to Richfield, and he took her driving in his car, and that's pretty brave, actually. So Kent, we love you and miss you, and I hope this tribute makes you smile.
I love that Kent really instilled in us a love to travel. He really supported it when we would do things, and he would go out of his way to make great memories for us. I remember we went to Denver together, we drove together, we've gone to lots of places, and he's just really fun to travel with and see the world. He loves the world and the people in it, and it was just great to go with him on that.
Okay, something about Kent. I'm going to combine the two questions that were sent and just share a story about him. It was years ago, and we were working in his backyard, and I think we were doing a painting project, and Annie came over. She was quite young at the time, I think 8 or 9 or 10 or something, and she wanted to paint, and so I grabbed a paintbrush and handed it to her and kind of showed her what we were doing, and we worked together for a little while, and Kent was just next to us and happened to just listen to the conversation and watch what was going on. And afterwards he said, I really appreciated how you got Annie involved, and you were very patient with her and just let her take part in the project. And he was just really complimentary. And as I thought about that later, of course I was grateful for the words he shared, but I understood why he did, because Ken is very much like that. He is very patient. And Michael's talked about this many times. He was always very patient with us kids as he was teaching us new things, working on projects. He never seemed to lose his temper. And in being a dad myself, working with my kids, they don't work at the same pace oftentimes as we do as adults. And it can be very trying, very hard to be patient and to teach them without just saying, here, let me just do it myself. But Kent never did that. He was always just extraordinarily patient as he taught us things, and I think he really values that. And when he saw me trying to do that with Annie, he really, it really meant a lot to him, because that's what he values. That's what he did with us. So anyway, I love that about him, and there's the memory.
During my sophomore year at BYU, there was this time that I was particularly stressed out about money, and just randomly a check from Kent for $200 showed up in the mail on the very day that I was just praying for help and like some relief from my worries. And then that same thing happened like 2 months later, just another random $200 check from Kent. So I'm convinced that Heavenly Father knew that he could use Kent as a way to answer my prayers. And I know that happened for a lot of us, that he was just super in tune and super thoughtful and super great at following through with the impressions that he got to help us.
I remember one time when I was younger, Grandpa Kent took my siblings and some cousins to McDonald's, and I remember everybody was making fun of me because I was eating the syrup like straight out of the little container thing. But Grandpa Kent stood up for me and he was like, "We all know the only reason we have pancakes is to get the syrup into our mouths." And I still remember that to this day, and I still eat syrup out of the container, so it was a good lesson.
I remember when I was little, Grandpa used to give me gold coins, and I would save them up for when summer came around, because we would go to the carnival and we use them to buy tickets. And he liked that we used them for that, because he liked when we used his gold coins for fun experiences.
All right, I am driving in my car, and it is actually very fitting because my memory of Kent is when I was driving in a car with him. So we were going back and forth between Richfield and Delta. I had just barely got my learner's permit, and it was snowy, a huge blizzard, and Kent made me drive all the way. And he was cool, calm, just chill, probably doing a crossword or something, and I was white knuckling, like going probably 25 miles an hour. I just remember looking over at him, and he had this smug smile on his face. Just knowing that he's teaching me a life lesson, which he did, because after that trip, even though I was terrified and probably traumatized, I knew how to drive in the snow, and I wasn't afraid anymore when the snow would start. I'm like, oh, I've done worse than this. I can drive in the snow. It's not that big of a deal. So I'm definitely grateful for that. I think about that actually every time it snows and I'm driving. I'm like, I'm glad Kent made me drive that one day, because maybe I would take after my mother and never drive when it snowed. Just kidding, Mom. Anyway, so that's just something I loved about Kent. He was very good at teaching us, even if it wasn't the most gentle of manners, but he trusted us and he was calm and cool about it. Just one thing I admire about Kent is how he just takes life as it comes. He never seemed to complain a lot. Even as he declined in his older age, I just noticed what a good attitude he had. And I'm sure he was miserable, but you really wouldn't know that, because he just was chill. Kind of always had that same attitude of, well, it is what it is, and I'm just going to accept what comes. So I always thought that was super, super admirable about Kent.
A memory I have of Kent is when him and Mom first got together before they got married. They were just dating. They were in their honeymoon phase, and he was nice. I mean, he was always nice. Who are we kidding? But I remember we would go out to breakfast. For some reason, it was just me, Mom, and Kent, and I don't know where Emily and Michael would have been, maybe visiting in Delta. I don't know. But we would go to breakfast, and I liked my milk at breakfast, and it wasn't free refills, and he was always just like, "You can get as much milk as you want, Julie." And that was just something, I don't know why, but it always just stuck in my head, that, because it was like $2 a glass, and I drink it. But Mom was always like, "Wow, he's buying you endless amounts of milk." So that's a memory. And he taught us a lot, but one thing that sticks out of my head, and this maybe might be a memory as well, but he was always someone that I could talk to when, I think most of you know how awful my divorce was, and not to be like a downer right now, but I could always call him, and I called him many, many times, crying and just not in a great place. And he was always very non-emotional, which sometimes isn't a good thing, but for me it was a very good thing. And he was very good to talk me down from things and help me see things in a different way. And I think that overall is the biggest thing that I appreciated from him. That's kind of when we really got close, and he really did, more than any of you guys know, help me through that awful, awful time of my life. So that was special.
Hey guys, I was just going to talk about Kent for a minute. One of the memories and a lot of the things that I learned about Kent was whenever he would come visit or I would come to his house, our thing was to wake up before everybody else in the house. And if it was at my house, I would have to have the coffee prepared and ready for him. No creamer, straight black. And we would sit and talk for a good hour and a half, 2 hours before I would go to work every day when we were together. And I learned a lot from Kent in those talks and really miss him.
So I loved Grandma's German pancakes growing up as a kid, and I remember we'd go into Richfield and she'd make them every morning for us, and they were just delicious. And so I tried to adopt that tradition of making German pancakes whenever Grandma and Grandpa came down to visit us. And so, yeah, every morning that they'd spend the night out at our house, I'd wake up and make German pancakes for him. And Grandpa would come out and have his coffee with me, and we'd talk, and he would tell me stories about when he had served for us, and he'd tell me stories about just his life in general, and he'd ask questions about me. And it was just a great opportunity to talk to him and get to know him more than I had known him in the past. And because as a kid, I think a lot of my memories of him were just every time we would say goodbye, he'd give us gold dollars, which was a super cool tradition, and I tried to save those so to hold on for memory's sake and stuff like that. And Grandpa he was an amazing person, and I loved all of the memories I have with him, and I loved the interactions we had and the times that we had together. And I remember the day that my mom had told me he had passed, and Persephone was a few months old at the time, and she was still getting her eyesight in and everything, and she would kind of stare off into space when me and Haley would try and talk to her at times, and she would just like start smiling, and we figured she was looking at like someone or something, and we kind of had the ongoing thought that she was just staring at her friends, and we figured it was like family members that were, in a different place, just contacting her and making her smile and giving her some love. And I remember the day that my mom had told me he had passed, she just would stare into space more than ever before and just smile so big. And it was just really heartwarming because I knew that she was staring at Grandpa and they were just having a great experience together. And we all love Grandpa very much, and we know he's doing good, and yeah, we miss you.
All right, I have a lot of great memories from Kent. One of my favorite is I was probably 13 or 14, and it was during the summer, so I was spending a lot of time. I was still living in Delta at the time, but I was spending a lot of time in Richfield because it was summer, and Kent and Mom were putting their sprinkling system in. So we were really getting into mountain biking. I don't know if the family remembers that, when we were biking a lot. And I wanted a really nice mountain bike, but they were a lot of money. So Ken told me that he would buy me a mountain bike if I put in their sprinkling system. So I kept track of my hours, and I honestly worked the whole summer long digging trenches by hand. It was very hard work, and I think he paid me like $1.50 an hour or something, if I remember right. But I worked hard throughout the summer and got enough money to buy my bike. So at the end of the summer, we went and bought it, which was really cool. And then a few months later, I had the bike in Delta, and somebody stole it out of the garage, which was very disappointing because I'd worked a lot for it. So next time I was back in Richfield, Kent walks in the room and hands me a check for, I think it was $500 written to me, and he said, go buy yourself a new bike. So I thought that was pretty awesome. He knew that I'd worked hard for it, and you know, once it was stolen, he just bought me a new bike, which was pretty cool. One thing that I learned from Kent was to probably have confidence in myself. For those of you that lived with him would know this. If something needed to be done, the excuse of, I don't know how to do that, wouldn't work. If you didn't know how to do it, you figured it out. So with our Ruth, our car that we had, I remember things would break on it and he would just say, okay, go change the alternator or the starter. And we had no idea how to work on cars, never done it before, but he obviously guided us through that process. And it was just really cool because things that I didn't think that I could do or had the skills to do, he showed me that we are capable of doing cool things. And to this day, I still love doing things myself and figuring things out. So those are a couple of my fun memories from Kent.
Well, one of my favorite memories about Kent is also one of the first ones. When he first joined the family, he told me, Emily, and Steve he was going to take us to Disneyland and we can visit all the parks in California. And since I'd never been there and I've always wanted to go there, I was pretty excited and thought that he was, you know, a good addition to the family. But when we got there, this is the hardest I've ever seen Kent laugh in the entire time he was with the family. We were on this water, kind of like Rattlesnake Rapids, on Lagoon, but they had, I think it was at like Knott's Berry Farm, but you had the potential of getting wet. And so I just remember that we were all just sitting around. It was you know, me, Steve, Emily, Mom, and Kent, and I was kind of like just dodging all the little splashes. I didn't really want to get wet, and he was just, you know, he was laughing pretty much the entire ride. And then all of a sudden around the corner, and I wasn't aware of this, but he saw this waterfall, and it was like the biggest water feature of the entire ride. And sure enough, I was kind of, before this, I was kind of bragging that I, you know, hadn't gotten a lot of water. I got a few drops here and there. Steve and Emily got a little bit, you know, more wet than I was. And so anyway, the tube just turned. I saw it just at the last minute. I looked up and just got totally drenched. I mean, head to toe, soaking wet, and he just erupted and the loudest laughter I had ever seen him, you know, he ever had. And so, and I was just one of my favorite memories. I always remember that. I was looking over at him. I'm like, wow, he's like really laughing hard. And so, and I to this day, I still think that's the hardest and most genuine laugh he ever had, was watching me just get totally dunked under this waterfall at that park. So anyway, that's my memory.
So when I try to just think of like my one favorite memory of Kent, I don't know if I can narrow it down to one, but I have like an image in my head of Kent that's one of my favorites. And it's of him sitting in the audience at one of my performances, just smiling, grinning ear to ear. And I remember seeing that image of Kent so many times because he just showed up to everything. Whether it was just like a very insignificant performance of mine or something that was really important to me, he was just always there, grinning ear to ear. And so that's my favorite memory of Kent. Hands down, the most important lesson I feel like Kent taught me was just not to be afraid to try things that were difficult. I think I grew up in my mind just always feeling a little bit scared to try anything new. And then I remember Kent coming into my life and just breaking me of that habit by example, and by also just having those conversations with me to push me to do things that were difficult. And he really just instilled in me the value of trying things that were outside of my comfort zone so that I could stretch and grow as a person. And even to this day, when I make difficult decisions, I can hear his advice in my head telling me, like, don't be afraid to try something that seems really scary and seems really hard.